Welcome to the NCDWI Guy podcast, where defenders of the Constitution assemble to prepare for courtroom battle and firm owners gather to develop marketing strategies that will revolutionize the practice of criminal defense. Here's your host, the NCDWI Guy, Jake Minnick.
Hello, fellow freedom fighters, and welcome to episode 115 of the NCDWI Guy podcast. On today's episode, we are talking about how to deal with an upset client. This is a really important episode because this is something that we're all going to have to deal with at one point or another, regardless of the practice area that we're in, regardless of where we practice. This is just part of being in the service industry and offering a professional service, is dealing with a client, dealing with somebody that is paying for services who is upset. So we're going to talk first of all about how to avoid having an upset client. And then secondly, we're going to talk about what to do if you have an upset client that calls in. So first and foremost, before we kind of dive into either of those two topics, how to avoid having an upset client, and then what to do if you get a call from an upset client. First and foremost, always recognize that when somebody calls in upset, generally there is a reason that they are upset. And sometimes it's because your firm, my firm, has done something wrong. Sometimes it's because another agency or person has messed up, clerk's office, the DMV, an alcohol assessor, that somebody else has kind of made a mistake and they don't know who else to call about that. So sometimes it may be the fault of your firm. Sometimes it's a different agency or person that has caused the issue. But just recognize that most of the time when an upset person calls in, they have a reason to be upset. There are some people, but I think very few, some people that just live angry, that just wake up in the morning, they get out of the bed, they put their feet on the floor, and they are at a 7 out of 10 on the anger scale. Just wake up ready to fight, wake up ready to be mad at somebody. But I think that is the very slim minority of people that feel that way about about life, that feel that way all the time. So when you have an upset client, just recognize that there is likely a legitimacy to the person being upset. I think one of the major problems that you have when a client calls in upset is that there immediately becomes this barrier or this wall. And it doesn't matter who at your office is kind of setting up that barrier. Maybe it's you that's talking with the client. Maybe it's the person working at reception, a paralegal that is kind of putting up that wall. But there becomes this defensive posture of, oh shoot, I'm dealing with somebody that is upset. Let me defend. Let me explain. Let me give excuses. Don't do that. Instead, recognize that the person is legitimately upset. Remain calm. Try to understand what the issue is, and then be in that allows you to be in a state of mind, a state of calm, where you can then problem solve and figure out what needs to happen. Don't need to be in a defensive posture. Don't need to be trying to CYA. Right? That's not the goal in a moment where client calls up upset. Offering an explanation of what's going on so the person can have a better understanding, the upset client can have a better understanding. Offering a game plan for here's what we're going to do now that this has happened. Missed court, we've got an order for arrest out. We got a letter that needs to go into the DMV. You've got a issue with how the completion of treatment was sent into the alcohol assessor. Let's diagnose the problem and figure out what the next steps are to fixing it. Ultimately, the upset client wants the issue that they're calling about addressed. So it's about communicating calmly, figuring out what the issue is, and then communicating that. So again, just being in a position as a firm of empathy and understanding that an upset person, generally speaking, is calling in because they are legitimately mad about something. Just recognizing that instead of, again, being in this defensive position, understanding that, this person has a right to be angry. They appear to be very angry about the situation. How can I help? How can I respond so that we can get this person where they want to be? If you don't have that defensive wall up, it's going to be much easier to diagnose the problem, to problem solve. It's very difficult to problem solve when your brain is in a position of anxiety. So the more calm that you can remain, the better the position that you can be in terms of being able to problem solve and recognize, again, that this person is legitimately calling in upset. So how can you avoid having an upset client? Well, first and foremost is that you should be selective with the clients that you agree to represent. I'll repeat that. Be selective with the clients that you agree to represent. Once you are in a case, you are in the attorney-client relationship with that client for whatever period of time that the case goes on for. So be selective with the clients that you agree to represent. You are not obligated to represent anybody. You're not obligated to get involved in each and every single person that calls you. That's why we don't do anything outside of criminal defense work, because we shouldn't be doing anything outside of criminal defense work. We're not obligated to do that. We refer it to somebody else. Just because that client called us about their personal injury case doesn't mean I'm going to represent them on their personal injury case. You're not obligated to represent every person that calls your office. So we are going to talk for a second about the 80-20 rule, right? The Pareto principle. And this rule says that 80% of outcomes come from 20% of causes. When you apply this math to an upset client, what that means is that 80% of your upset client calls are going to come from 20% of your clients, right? Again, when somebody calls in, they generally have a reason to be upset, but not everybody calls in with the same level of visceral speech, right? Not everybody calls in and expresses their anger in the same way. And so you've got to develop the warning signs of a client that is going to be a lot of work. Got to recognize that in the consultation and recognize that you're not obligated to take every case. Now, this is very difficult because, especially when you're early in practice, but even 10 years into practice, we're running a business, and a business at a very fundamental and basic level is fueled by revenue, right? Fueled by money, fueled by client fees. And so it's very difficult to send somebody to another lawyer or to say, I don't think we're the right fit to handle your case, because you are turning down money. You're turning down fees when you do that. And that's very difficult to do. That's why when I first came out of practice, basically when somebody walked into the office and said, can you help with this? Pretty much. I mean, there was still certain things that I would refer out, but it was pretty much like, heck yeah, you tell me what you need me to do, because why? I needed clients, right? I needed to generate those revenues. As we've gotten to be a more stable business, a growing business, a thriving business, now it's much easier to send cases that we don't feel comfortable handling to another attorney. But even when it is a case that we're comfortable handling, if it's a client that's not going to be a good fit with our culture, is going to cause our staff a lot of headaches, is going to cause me or other attorneys at the office headaches, that's not a good fit. And it's not fair to your other clients. This is what I always tell the team. It's not fair to our other clients if we are devoting so much resources, so much time to one client because they are just constantly pushing against the grain, right? We're not able to represent the other clients at our office the way that they deserve to be represented because we're spending 80% of our time on this 20% clientele, which is causing, causing grief, stirring up things that don't need to be stirred up. So again, part of it is just recognizing that during the consultation, and there are different warning signs that we're not going to get into today, but just know this, that when you are talking with a client, they are to some extent putting their best foot forward to you as you are putting your best foot forward to them, right? When a client calls you, they haven't paid you anything, right? They haven't paid you anything. And so, people are always answering the phone when it's a new client. People are always, communicating and answering every question and being responsive and calling people back, right? And you should be doing that throughout representation. This shouldn't just be during the client consultation, but we all know that when you are being interviewed, so to speak, as a potential hire, you're on your game, right? You're putting, as an attorney, your best foot forward to the client because you want them to hire you. It is the same thing for the client. They are putting their best foot forward to you, right? This is why I think so often in some ways you hear this during a DWI consultation. This isn't who I am. I never do this. This isn't the person that I am. There's a justification of, I'm not a bad person. I want to present to you, the lawyer, who I am, the type of person that I am, right? So the client is putting their best foot forward to you. So just recognize that if you're seeing warning signs of a potential client that is really going to cause your team, your staff, grief, anxiety down the road, it's only going to get worse as representation continues. If a person is high needs in the consultation, only going to become higher needs as the representation goes on, because again, they're putting their best foot forward in that interview. Nobody is trying to come across as a pain in the butt to the other person in a consultation, because it's kind of like dating. Both sides are trying to feel out. The attorney is trying to feel out the client. Client is trying to feel out the attorney. The attorney is trying to sell themselves to the client. The client is trying to communicate to the attorney, I'm a good person to represent. It's a dating relationship before you enter the marriage of an attorney-client relationship once ink is put to paper on an engagement contract. So just recognize that if you're seeing warning signs in the consultation, you're going to see those become worse as representation continues. You have to know your ideal client profile and be okay with saying no to representation. You have to be okay with saying no to representation. So that's the first way to avoid an upset client, is to not get into a relationship with a client that you think is going to cause you or your team a lot of grief. That is difficult to do, but you owe that to your team and you owe that to your other clients to make sure that you're devoting the appropriate time and attention to every client's matter that you are agreeing to represent. Number 2, be upfront with potential and new clients with your office policies. So again, during the dating relationship and during the kind of beginning of representation, explain what representation is going to look like. Tell the client how payment is going to be collected and at what time payment is going to be collected. Don't assume that the client just knows everything about the attorney-client relationship. Most of the time, when somebody calls us because they got a traffic ticket, DWI, misdemeanor charge, they've never talked to a lawyer before. They've never talked to a law office team before. So they don't know how this interaction is supposed to go, when things are going to be due. Don't expect the client to know how to deal with your office. That is going to cause miscommunication. It's going to cause a lack of trust, and it's going to legitimately cause the client to be upset because they were not told this was how representation was supposed to be. Talk to the client during the initial consultation, during the follow-up, during the kind of follow-up from client signing a contract. Talk to the client about when they can expect communication and from who. If it's your office policy that we will contact you when updates come in about your case, please feel free to call us at any time. My paralegal, Susan, is going to call you back and update you periodically about your case. We will communicate with you a week before court. We will communicate with you about your new court date right after court. Explain to the client when they can expect communication. For the longest time, my policy as an attorney has been that if I've got current clients that need to talk to me, unless it's an emergency, I have a Friday afternoon block of time where clients can call me back, or can call and talk to me, or I will call them. But there's a Friday afternoon block. And in the initial action plan that I send to them immediately after our consultation, so this is before they've even hired me on the case, I am explaining when I will be available for communication. I'm also explaining in the action plan that primary communication is going to come from my case manager, Stephanie, that she's going to be kind of the primary point of contact. She is likely going to be able to get answers back and forth to that client faster than I can. So I explain that to the client. But at the beginning of representation, this is, again, before they've actually even hired me on the case. Most of the time, I'm communicating to them when they can expect communication, who they can expect it from. If they want to set up a meeting with me to have a call, here's the times that it can be done. Otherwise, what does the client expect? Well, when I call the office, the attorney should be sitting in the office and should be ready to communicate with me. And as unrealistic as that expectation is, why would the client know that? Why would the client know that that is unrealistic? If they've never dealt with an attorney before, if they don't know kind of the time constraints that an attorney has, they're just not going to be able to understand that there are these limitations and court obligations, and time time management is difficult. You've got to explain to the client up front what your communication policy is at the office. You also need to explain up front how your staff is going to be treated. You need to explain up front that if you're talking to my case manager, if you're talking to my supporting paralegal, if you're talking to somebody in reception, you should talk to them as though you talk to me. You should talk to the team as if you're talking to me. Because a lot of people, I think, a lot of clients talk very differently with their attorney than they talk to admin staff. And that is something that at our office, it's important for us to communicate to the client up front. When you talk to any person that's on the team, assume that talk to them like you would talk to me. If you wouldn't be ugly to me about something, don't be ugly to my team about something. We at the office really, I feel like have a pretty level playing field in terms of we value every member of the team on the office, regardless of whether they are a lawyer or not. Everybody is responsible for the success of a case. Everybody here at the team is responsible for getting great outcomes for our client. We're all responsible for that. So we expect our clients to also treat the team with that same amount of importance. Everybody on the team has this role in getting the desired outcome on the case. We're all working for that. We're all pulling hard on that front. And realistically at our office, the driving force, the lifeblood of the team is the support staff. They're the ones that are really responsible for getting the results that we're looking for our clients, and particularly giving the wow experience that we're looking for to our clients. So be upfront with clients about your office policies. Do not assume that they know how your office operates, how your office communicates, how your office collects payment, how your office will be giving over discovery, whatever it might be. Do not assume the client knows that. You've got to communicate the expectations to the client up front, because otherwise, if the client doesn't have the expectations from your office, they make up their own expectations of how representation is going to be done. And those may be unrealistic expectations. But if you haven't set the expectations, you cannot fault the client for having their own unrealistic expectations. So number 2, communicate your office policies to the client. This will help avoid upset clients. Number 3, this is going to make a lot of sense, be simple, but I don't want to miss this. Deliver wow experience. If you want to avoid upset clients, don't give crappy representation. Don't give subpar representation. Don't give standard representation. Don't give good representation. Give great representation. Give your client a wow experience. Now, this is easier said than done. And I don't want to pretend that we are giving every client that comes to our office the wow experience. We are really working hard to think of ways that we can improve the experience that our clients have when they call into the office, when we're communicating to them about something, when we're following up. We are constantly trying to improve what we talk about as the wow experience that we're trying to deliver to the client. But we're not there yet. And there's really kind of no threshold at which we're going to be there, because there's always going to be ways that we can improve the client experience. But if you want to avoid upset clients, have an amazing client experience. That's the easiest way to avoid upset clients, because if you deliver a wow experience to clients, you're going to have happy clients. You're going to have clients that are shouting from the rooftops about the amazing representation that you have delivered, regardless of the outcome. Regardless of the outcome on their case, if you've delivered the wow experience, you are going to have clients that are happy with your representation, that are excited, ecstatic about your representation. So don't miss that opportunity, because again, you want to get more clients coming in down the road. These clients that you've given wow experience to are going to be your best salespeople for getting new clients. and you're going to save the headache of having to deal with an upset client if you're delivering a wow experience. So those are ways to avoid having an upset client. Now, what do you do if you have a upset client? So this is part 2 of the episode today. What do you do when you get a upset client calling into the office or coming by the office? Well, you need to deal with it. You need to respond to the person that is upset. Brian King, who has been on the podcast, has a great policy at his office. I think he calls it the SOS policy. And basically anybody at his office, anybody on his team, attorney, staff, doesn't matter. Anybody on his team can utilize this intra-office policy, which is that if they send out an SOS, the supervising attorney on that case will call the client within 24 hours. I'm assuming business hours, but that may not be the case. Within 24 hours, the supervising attorney, supervising person that is responsible for the case will call the client back. And the reason for that, again, just the outsider's perspective, is that fast response time does so much in terms of the client's concern, whatever the complaint is, whatever the reason is for the client being upset. If there's a timely response, that is going to immediately de-escalate the situation. If you don't timely respond, this is going to have the reverse effect. Not only now is the client going to be upset about whatever is going wrong with their case or whatever, kind of letter they're getting from the DMV or the clerk or from, communication with the alcohol assessor, whatever is causing the initial call, the initial concern. Now, not only do they have that problem still to deal with, but they're now further upset because you have not communicated to them. You have now created an additional reason for the client to be upset. The lack of communication, the lack of response time has now created an additional reason for the client to be upset with your team, with your office. That's not helpful. If you're trying to de-escalate the situation, now you're creating kind of even more and more angst, more and more anger on the client's end through that lack of response. As the attorney, if you don't respond and you have staff that are working at your office, you are causing your staff an enormous amount of extra headache. And I am very much guilty on this front. And so I can speak just from a point of personal knowledge, and I can apologize to my team right now, because there have been times when my team has said, "Hey, this client called in, has a concern about this. Can you give them a call back?" And I don't respond. Then they get a second call from that client, a third call from that client, and I still haven't responded. Again, now the client is getting more and more wound up each time. And guess who's having to deal with it? Is it me directly? Not really. It's my team that's having to deal with that. They're having to be like, "I'm sorry that, Mr. Minnick hasn't called you back yet. We're going to talk to him and have him reach out." So it really undermines your team, because now they're having to spend their time repeatedly dealing with the same client concern, who's now growing angrier and angrier. And every time one of those calls comes in, it's causing emotional stress, emotional anxiety for your team. Even if the person isn't mad at them, it's causing emotional stress on that person because they're dealing with the upset client. More than that, a lot of times the client is now getting angry at your receptionist, at your case manager, at your paralegal, because of the fact that they think that paralegal has lied to them, that receptionist has lied to them. "You told me Mr. Minnick was going to call me back about this, and he hasn't." So now the client thinks you're lying to me. You didn't even give this message to Mr. Minnick, or you didn't communicate how important this was to me. So it's your fault that he didn't call me back, right? They don't assume it's me being the like lazy procrastinator, not calling them back. They think it is my legal assistant that has caused this problem of getting back in touch with them. So now they're going to take out their frustrations and vent their angst on your team. So it's really unfair to not respond quickly to a client complaint. Again, you're going to avoid that complication of lack of response. This is one of the most, most utilized. I heard this from one of the bar representatives. One of the most biggest complaints that the bar receives about lawyers is, my attorney won't call me back. Right. I mean, that they call in, there's a lack of communication. My attorney won't communicate with me. So it just says something about kind of how important this is to communicate back. If this is really one of the main kind of pressure points or pinpoints that the bar receives from a grievance end of things is, hey, my attorney won't call me back, that's an issue. And I've talked about in the past, if you were to go into an office and pay somebody $2,500, $3,500, $5,000 to do something for you, not to give you anything, not to buy a product, but that their service, that they would do something for you, you'd expect that person to call you back. You'd expect that person is going to be responsive to you. Now, maybe if their team is responsive, you don't even care. It's just, I need some communication. But when you're paying that kind of money, those kind of fees for a service, you just expect that communication is going to be good. You expect high class, high level communication. So if you're not communicating, you are giving a really terrible client experience. And again, I say this from a position of guilty as charged. I have not been responsive to many, many clients over the years, and it's never been helpful. It's never helped. I've gotten better, much better about it. It's never helped to ignore a problem. Problems are not going away. Your client's concern is not going away. Your client's issue that they are facing is not going away. It's not getting better. You've got to respond in order to help take care of the problem, in order to assess what needs to be done to fix what can be done. You'd be surprised at how much of the time an explanation can be helpful. I had a client several years back that had left a nasty review on Facebook, on Google. I don't remember where it was. Had left a nasty review. My client my attorney threw me under the bus. Didn't explain. Didn't do what he needed to do. I don't even remember what the complaint actually said, what the review said. But I thought it was odd because I felt like the representation had been, the relationship had been great. I thought we got an outcome that was a really good outcome on the case. So I called up the client, didn't respond online, just kind of generically respond. I called the client up and I just said, hey, I saw the review that you left. I think it was on Facebook. I saw the review that you left on Facebook. I just wanted to kind of talk to you about that and kind of see what, how you're feeling and can you tell me what, we can do to improve. So we started engaging in conversation and I explained, kind of representation from my point of view and what we had done on the case and, conversations that I had with the prosecution and the court about the case. And he was just blown away. He said, I didn't realize that all of that was going on behind the scenes. I'm really, I feel much better about representation. Thank you for the explanation. And ultimately he removed the review. He may have even left us a positive review. I can't remember, what happened, but the negative review was gone. And, it helped me because I realized, hey, I need to be better about communicating to my clients what's happening at each stage of the representation. But again, if I had just ignored that complaint, the review would have remained up. And, more importantly, my client wouldn't have had the kind of correct viewpoint, the correct understanding of what happened on their case. So you'd be amazed at what an explanation can do for somebody. If there's been an issue that's been created, just calling and explaining. Sometimes an apology is necessary. If your office is responsible for some issue that's happened on the client's case, an apology is necessary and can go a long way. Even if you haven't done something wrong, an explanation about, hey, here's where the disconnect is, here's what's going on. We can kind of work through this. This is the next steps. You'd be amazed at how much an explanation can really help the client feel better about things, get the client's questions answered, anxiety about the issue and unknowns about the issue that they're upset about is going to be taken away through that conversation. Finally, if a problem arises in the office, or problem arises with a client being upset, see this as, again, not a defensive wall position, but as an opportunity to be wowing a client, And the reason why there is this opportunity to wow a client is that think about every single time that you have called upset about something, that you have, had a problem with the business and you've complained about it. Think about all of the different times where there's been an issue and it has not gotten resolved well. Well, you're going to remember that, right? I complained about this particular plate of food, and the manager told me to go to hell, right? Or I complained about the way that my flight had been canceled, and the flight attendant just said, or the person at the flight airline desk just said, well, we can't do anything. That's just what happens. This was in our policies, whatever it might be. You can think of times at a hotel, a restaurant, at a auto dealership, wherever it might be. You can think of times when you've gotten bad service, and not only have you gotten bad service, but then when you've complained about the bad service, that isn't resolved well at all either. So see this opportunity when an upset client calls in as an opportunity to provide wow experience. What is the client really not expecting when they call in upset about something? They're not expecting a good response to that complaint. So if you deliver a wow experience to the client in response to a complaint, you are going to not only hopefully get the issue addressed, not have an upset client anymore, but maybe all of a sudden have an advocate who says, look, these people, own this, or they explained to me what was going on and they fixed it. And dang, I just have not seen service delivered like this when I've had a complaint in the past about service. That you're going to set yourself apart through that great delivery of service. So that's kind of the final piece in terms of responding to a client complaint. So a couple more things. First of all, if you want to avoid upset clients, and this kind of goes back to how to avoid upset clients, but it's kind of a separate category, because this does not have anything really to do with clients, but more with your team. If you want to avoid upset clients, have a culture in which your firm values clients. It's so easy to create or allow, even if you don't create, to allow a culture of complaining. This client is such an idiot. This client, didn't take ownership. This client, has been so terrible to deal with. If your firm has a culture of complaining about the people that you represent, it is automatically going to lower the level of representation that you deliver to your clients, because your clients are now seen as a problem to the happiness of your team, to the success of your firm, when really your clients are responsible for the success of your firm. Don't create a culture, and don't create, because I don't know that most people create a culture. Don't allow a culture of complaining about clients in your office. This is easy. This is an easy one to do, to allow a culture of complaining, because we've all dealt with difficult cases. We've all dealt with difficult clients. And sometimes you just want to vent about that, right? Sometimes you just want to get that off your chest. Man, I just can't believe the way that this person treated me, or this person talked to me. They didn't appreciate all the work that I had done for them. They didn't, they were mad about this, and it wasn't my fault. It's so easy to vent, to have this culture of complaining. Don't allow it. Don't allow a culture of complaining. If you value clients in your intra-office communications, in the way that you speak about clients, if you value clients and the way that your team gets to help them succeed in their lives, you are going to, as a team and as an individual, deliver a different level of service than if you have an attitude of complaining and negative thoughts about your clients. Don't allow that culture of complaining. Last point on this, and this is something that, again, if you've got a client, you signed up to handle their case, you are in it. So if you've got a client that has hired you to perform a legal service, you're in it to help that client. You got to be a zealous advocate for that client. However, you and your staff are not a punching bag. You and your staff are not a punching bag. You're not required to be abused. So if you have a call from an upset client, stay calm, respond to that upset client calmly. But if that person is not dealing with you or your team in a respectful tone, that they're being verbally abusive, they're cursing at you, they're cursing at your team, it is not required to be a punching bag. And you can tell the client, we need to have a conversation when you are in a better state of mind. I would be happy to schedule a time to talk with you, but you are not thinking clearly right now. You're being verbally abusive, and we need to have a conversation when you are in a better state of mind. Be calm, but be assertive. Be firm about the fact that you're not going to take verbal abuse. And I have not been good about this. This is a area of weakness. I feel like this whole episode is like, my individual weaknesses on this front, but I am not good about this. I have been a punching bag for clients, and I've allowed my staff to be punching bags for clients because I'm so worried about what an upset client is going to do that I don't want to kind of lay down the law and kind of draw a line in the sand and say, hey, you can't go beyond that line right now because you're being abusive to my team. I've not been good at drawing that line and saying, this isn't okay. This isn't an okay form of representation. or an okay form of communication because I'm so worried that they're going to get further upset by that. It's okay to draw that line in the sand and say, this is out of bounds. We need to sit down when you are calm and collected. Don't overreact to a threat about a bar complaint. Oh, well, I'm going to, I don't like the way that I've been treated. I'm going to complain to the bar. I think the idea of there being a complaint to the bar about us, for some of us, causes so much stress, so much anxiety, that it really kind of puts us in a bad mental position. We get very worried about that. Don't over-respond. Don't overreact to a bar threat. Recently had a client that said, I'm gonna contact the bar. I was trying to help this person through an issue that had been caused outside of our control, outside of the firm's control. I explained this. I said, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to help you through this process. Client, again, legitimately had a area of concern, legitimately had an issue. He didn't know where to point the finger. And it's easy to point the finger at the only person that is responsible, that you paid to help you through the case. So it was pointed at me, and hey, I'm going to contact the bar. And I explained, here's how we're going to deal with this. Here's what I have been doing to help clear this up. And it wasn't our fault, but here's what we're doing to help clear this up. And then I put in a link. Here's how to file a bar grievance if you want to file a bar grievance. And I think that in some situations, again, I don't want to say this is the right approach in every single case, but I think in some situations when you're faced with that client that's threatening the bar, it's okay to say, here's how you do that. If you haven't done anything wrong, the client looks at that and says, well, okay, well, if this person is communicating, here's how to contact the bar. Maybe my concern is misplaced. But again, I think it really de-escalated the situation in terms of, not saying, well, you better not, I didn't respond, you better not contact the bar, or out of fear and say, oh, please don't contact the bar. Just, if you feel that's appropriate, here's how you do that. It's being in that level of calm. And again, explaining, here's the circumstances, here's what we're doing, here's how we're proceeding forward with representation. I think it's really important to not overreact to a client who is upset. If they're threatening things, if they're mad, again, it's okay for them to vent, and it's okay for them to be upset. So remain calm. But if that anger spills over into an unhealthy level, into an abusive level, you don't have to allow that type of verbal abuse to happen, either with yourself or with your team. Again, remain calm, explain the circumstances. If an apology is necessary about anything, apologize, own up to your mistake, own up to your fault, tell the client, here's what we did wrong, here's what we are doing to fix it. Be honest with your clients. If you explain to people what happened, doesn't mean they're not going to be angry about it. Doesn't mean that they're not going to be upset, but they're definitely going to be less upset than if you cover things up and if you lie about what's happening and you point the finger at the wrong person. Own up to mistakes, communicate what's happening, what steps you're taking to resolve the situation, what step you're taking to make things better, and stay calm. Remain calm throughout that response time and be fast to respond. So those are some steps that you can take to avoid having upset clients, steps that you can take if you do get a call from an upset client, something that we all deal with, something that we all have to, maybe to some extent, master, is dealing with an upset client. Important for us to get this right, important for us to provide the wow experience in response to an upset client calling in. Hope this was helpful. Look forward to speaking with you again next time. If you found the information in this podcast to be valuable, I simply ask that you pay it forward and share this podcast with another member of the legal community. Also, if you would leave us a rating or a review on whatever platform you are listening on, I would greatly appreciate it.